They designed it meticulously. Every line, every lever, every little lie calibrated to keep you confined within their rules. They tested your reactions like a lab rat, fed you silence when you needed clarity, chaos when you sought peace. Their game wasn't born of spontaneity. It was architecture. A long con dressed as companionship, smiles used as decoys, promises positioned like traps. They studied your patterns not to understand you, but to predict you. That was their brilliance, convincing you that your next move would always fall within their control. They had every exit mapped, every counter prepared, until you didn't play by instinct, until you didn't scream when they expected noise, until you made one move, calculated, quiet, devastating, and in that moment their entire masterpiece shattered into memory. They never expected resistance dressed in patience. See, predators thrive on predictability. They build their kingdom on the assumption that you'll chase closure, that you'll flinch under pressure, that you'll apologize for bleeding too loud. They count on your emotional reflexes like chess masters betting on pawns to move first. But you didn't follow the script. You paused. You watched. And then, without spectacle, you moved, not with fury, with precision. That's the detail they missed. You weren't reacting. You were realigning. You stopped asking for fairness in a rigged arena. You stepped off the board. That wasn't rebellion. It was revelation. And their system, perfect as it was, had no contingency plan for someone who simply stopped believing in it. Psychologically, control depends on your participation. That's the quiet truth manipulators pray you never realize. Their control isn't brute force. It's the illusion that you need the game. They craft narratives that require your guilt, your confusion, your self-doubt to function. Without your investment, the entire structure becomes a sandcastle. Your move wasn't an explosion, it was erosion. A single choice that broke the feedback loop. You didn't yell. You didn't retaliate. You removed the power source, your attention, and in doing so, you became unsolvable. Their perfect equation began to collapse because it was always built on the assumption that you wouldn't change, that you'd keep dancing for their validation, but you walked away, and their house of cards was never built to survive that. They laughed at your boundaries, painted them as moods, framed your silence as manipulation, your questions as overthinking. Every time you tried to build clarity, they distorted it. Every time you tried to build trust, they tested it. That wasn't care. That was conditioning. They needed you disoriented, needed you unsure of where you ended and they began. That fog kept them in power, until one day you looked at the pieces and realized this was never about love. It was about leverage. It was never a bond. It was a bet. And so you cashed out. One move, no explanation, no return, and now they sit there, surrounded by rules that no longer apply, strategies that no longer work, trying to figure out when they lost grip. They call you unpredictable now, but that's a lie too. You were always consistent, loyal, empathic. They just confused your grace for gullibility. They misread your stillness as surrender. So when you finally chose yourself, it shocked them, not because they didn't see it coming, but because they never believed you would actually do it. People like them mistake empathy for compliance. But you didn't flip the board. You studied it. You didn't react. You recorded every broken promise, every micro-cut delivered with a smile. You were silent, not because you lacked words, but because you knew theirs were empty. And when the final line was crossed, you moved. Just once. But that single movement carried the weight of every time you should have left and didn't. And they felt it. All of it. At once. Now they spin, rewriting the history, saying you changed, saying they don't know what happened. But you know. You remember. You remember the games they played with your vulnerability, the way they turned your honesty into ammunition. You remember the tone they used when you cried, the applause they withheld, the way they kept you guessing as a form of control. And your move, your exit, wasn't just about leaving. It was about ending the cycle. You didn't just walk away. You shut the whole system down. And that's what makes you dangerous now. Not your anger, your evolution. They were flawless until you stopped trying. That's what they'll never say out loud. They had every move countered until you stopped making them. You became a void, and in that void they found their own reflection. No more distractions, no more games. Just the consequence of watching someone you thought was yours rise above your design. You didn't destroy them, you simply stopped feeding them. And that starvation speaks louder than any revenge ever could. You don't haunt them with hatred. You haunt them with silence, with freedom, with the reality that they cannot recreate the game without a player like you. Their perfect game had no ending. That was the design, to keep you circling, doubting, proving, chasing. But your one move gave it an expiration date. You created closure without their permission, and now they're stuck, replaying it, wondering if there's a new angle, a new manipulation, a new tactic to regain control. But there isn't. You broke the loop. That's the power of a well-timed choice. It doesn't just end the game, it rewrites the rules. You were once the pawn. Now, you're the architect. And their strategies? They're fossils now. Relics of a time when they thought they owned you. You're not here to settle scores. You're here to bury systems. You don't need an audience. Your life is your proof. And their confusion? That's their punishment. Every step you take forward is a sentence in the book they'll never finish reading. You were the twist they didn't see coming. And now they sit with their scripts, useless, outdated, laughable, while you author a story they were never meant to understand. Their game was perfect, until you made one move, one undeniable, irreversible move. And now, you are not even playing. You're building, thriving, free, while they are still trying to decipher a game that no longer includes you. They rehearse your reactions long before you give them. That's the truth beneath their false concern, their artificial chaos, their timed silences. Toxic people don't operate in real time. They operate in prediction. They study you like a machine. Your loyalty becomes a lever, your empathy a switch. They depend on you being who you've always been, forgiving, over-explaining, predictable. They make bets on your heartbreak. Their entire strategy depends on the repetition of your kindness. So when you shift, when you move differently than they expected, it cuts deeper than any insult. Unexpected moves rip through the script they memorized. They don't just lose control, they lose identity. Because without your compliance, their power evaporates. You change the rhythm, and they start choking on the silence that used to comfort them. You did it once. Walked away without closure. Replied without explanation. Set a boundary without bending. That single move shattered the rhythm they'd built their manipulation on. You didn't cry. You didn't argue. You didn't ask why. That silence hit harder than any scream. That indifference tasted like poison in their mouth. Because toxic people don't know how to process unpredictability. They fear it, they mock it. But when it happens, they spiral. You did what they thought you never would. You became unknowable. And that, more than anything, is what cut them. Because if they can't predict you, they can't control you. If they can't control you, they can't extract power from you. So now, they're left with noise. No system, no leverage. Just noise. Toxic people depend on routine to keep you in orbit. They insult you just enough to make you flinch, praise you just enough to make you stay. It's a rhythm, a cycle that looks like chaos, but is actually control. They time their apologies. They know when to withdraw affection and when to flood you with warmth. They rehearse these performances down to the word. But the moment you stop responding the way they expect, their act collapses. You were supposed to chase, but you closed the door. You were supposed to defend yourself, but you just smiled. You were supposed to fight back, but you left. And that deviation from the pattern, that's what left them shaking. They won't say it, but you haunt them now. Not because you were cruel, but because you became unreadable. They can't analyze you anymore. You're no longer open for decoding. You're no longer signaling like you used to, and without a signal, they starve. Toxic people feed off anticipation, off predictability. When they can't guess your next move, they panic, because the game is no longer rigged in their favor. They can't bait you if they don't know what you bite. You became a mirror without reflection. They stand in front of you now and see only themselves, and it sickens them. The move didn't have to be big. That's the elegance of it. Sometimes it's a look, a lack of reply, a shift in energy so small it doesn't scream, but it speaks, loudly. You didn't slam a door, you vanished through it. That minimal motion shattered their illusion of permanence. Toxic people think they're irreplaceable because they invest in being needed, not appreciated. But when you stopped needing, when you stopped explaining, they lost their script. You weren't supposed to stop. You weren't supposed to pause, but you did. And in that pause, they realized they had no backup plan for your awakening. What hurt them wasn't the move itself. It was the proof that you had it in you all along, that you had teeth, that you had options, that the leash they believed you were on was never tied to your throat, but your patience. You were a guest in their control, not a prisoner. And the moment you left, they had to face the reality. Your staying wasn't weakness, it was grace. Your forgiveness wasn't desperation, it was a test. And they failed. They failed because they confused love with leverage. And now? Now they stare at the absence and realize it's not just empty, it's final. Toxic people need the illusion of your confusion to operate. They gaslight, distort, and deny because their survival depends on your uncertainty. But when you become certain, even for one move, it fractures everything. That certainty cuts deeper than 1,000 arguments, because it means you're no longer seeking answers from them. You're no longer trying to make sense of their madness. You're no longer waiting for them to become who they pretended to be. That realization lands like a blade across their ego, because they didn't just lose control of the game, they lost access to your mind. And for someone who thrives on mental warfare, that's the death blow. They'll reach out now, not out of remorse, but out of desperation. They'll say the right words, mimic growth, perform regret, but you'll notice the stutter in their tone, the tremble in their eyes, because they know you've seen through the scaffolding. They know you've dismantled their rhythm. And that fear, that uncertainty, that doubt, it belongs to them now. You passed it back with one unexpected move. You don't have to explain yourself anymore. You are the explanation. Every step forward you take is proof that they never had you. Not truly. You were always holding back. You want vengeance? Make no sound. Make no noise. Just move. Not away from them, but toward yourself, toward your clarity, toward your peace.